Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is Joanna Belfer with Canto Books, and I'm delighted to be your host today for Celebrating Filipino American Women, Food, Friends, and Fugitives with Cindy Fazzi, Mia P. Manansala, and Jamie Lee Sogn. Our moderator today is Jazzy DeLeon with WNBA Authentic Voices. I just wanted to say also a big thank you to Phil-Am Arts Organization and the Women's National Book Association for co-hosting this event. The WNBA is hosting a giveaway for all of the participants who are joining us today. So if you are excited and want to join the giveaway, please drop a comment in the chat box and tell us where you're joining from and who you're most excited to hear from today. Thank you so much. So I will go ahead and introduce Jazzy. Jazzy DeLeon is an author, former foster child, family black sheep, and advocate for authentic storytelling. Her memoir, Brown Sheep, explores the struggles of growing up as an unseen and underestimated Filipino American in Los Angeles. She's been recognized as a semifinalist for the Book Life Award for Memoir, and her writing has also been featured in the San Francisco Writers Conference Anthology 2022. She's received a literary fellowship from the Authentic Voices in 2023. Welcome, Jazzy.
Thanks, Joanna.
And I will just turn it over to you so you can take it away.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here today. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Canto Books, Phil-Am Arts, WNBA for hosting this event celebrating Filipino American women authors in honor of Filipino Heritage Month. I'm so thrilled to present our panel of gifted Filipino American authors today, each with their own unique literary offerings in the realms of suspense, mystery, and thriller. So in September, Cindy released her third work, Multo, a thriller. Mia just released her fourth installment of her culinary cozy mystery series called Murder and Mammon. And Jamie has debuted her psychological thriller, The Salt House. So I totally encourage the audience to engage through the chat, through emojis. If any of our authors, you're welcome to respond to questions. We'll be reserving the last part of this event for our authors to answer your questions directly. And now I'm actually going to hand the mic to each author to introduce themselves. Why don't we start with Jamie?
Thank you so much, Jazzy. So I'm Jamie Lee Sogn. My debut psychological thriller is, the title is Salt House Place. And it features a biracial Filipina American protagonist like myself. So I grew up in Olympia, Washington. I now reside in Seattle, Washington with my husband and my 5-year-old boy. And I write very boring legal financial contracts by day. So I have to write about murder and more thrilling things by night. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Cindy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Fazzi. Multo is my third published novel, but it's my first thriller. I was born and raised in the Philippines. I came to this country in 1989. Multo, meaning ghost in Tagalog, is about a Filipino American bounty hunter named Domingo who is looking for the only quarry that has eluded him. He is chasing an undocumented Filipina, biracial Filipino woman named Monica who can disappear like a ghost.
So awesome. Mia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mia P. Manansala. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the author of the multi-award winning Tita Rosie's Kitchen Mystery Series. It is a lighthearted, humorous mystery series that centers around a family-owned Filipino restaurant in a fictional town outside of Chicago. And excuse me, the weather has changed like drastically over the last few days in Chicago, so like my allergies are really acting up. So I'm gonna be like hacking up along here. I'm not like sick, but yeah, expect a lot of awkward pauses. So but yes, and so the fourth book just came out, Murder and Momon. It follows it centers the calendar crew, who are the aunties of the story, and they are usually the ones who provide all the help and the gossip and are the ones all up in other people's lives. But the tables are turned because now the investigation centers on them, and my protagonist Lila has to delve into their secrets and find out who did they piss off enough to maybe want one of them dead.
Okay, she's serious. That's so awesome. Cindy, you had just mentioned that Multo isn't like your other books. So what drew you to the genre of mystery, thriller kind of suspense? And what do you find most compelling about writing in this genre?
So I originally wrote Multo from the perspective of Monica Reed, the undocumented immigrant. And at that time, the manuscript was considered literary fiction. It was also universally rejected by all the literary agents who read it. It took many years before it dawned on me to completely rewrite the book from the perspective of the bounty hunter. So once the narrator changed, the book organically became a thriller because the bounty hunter is all about the hunt. Once I realized what I had done, I completely embraced the thriller genre. I studied the conventions and followed it. And what I love about the thriller genre is that it allowed me to tackle immigration issues in an entertaining way, unlike literary fiction. So I really think I got published because my book is a thriller.
That's so exciting. Mia, so your book is a fourth installment, and you write culinary cozy mysteries. Maybe can you start by explaining like what the subgenre is for some of our readers who may not understand what that is?
Sure. Yeah. So I like to describe, so a lot of people were introduced to cozy mystery through my books, which I find like, really like, oh, wow, thank you. And so I like to describe cozy mysteries as like Hallmark movies with dead bodies. Because like cozy mysteries basically have no graphic violence, sex, or bad language on the page. So yes, there are dead bodies, but you are not going to get like a very graphic, gory description. The kids and animals will always be safe, right? This is like a beach read. This is something that you can read and finish before bed without worrying about any like nightmares or anything like that. But you do get the very satisfying feeling. Well, I find it satisfying of being able to enjoy the puzzle aspect of mystery solving, of trying to figure out, along with the sleuth or maybe for the sleuth, like who did it. For me, that's like the fun of the cozy mystery genre. And cozy mysteries have their own subgenre. So I write culinary, which means my books are centered around food. It includes recipes in the back, but there's also like crafting cozy mysteries and like music cozies and all different kinds. Like there's a little bit of something for everyone.
That's so awesome. And what compelled you to write in the genre?
So like my family's really big into mystery. I like my protagonist, I grew up in a multi-generational household. So I lived with like my maternal grandparents, my parents, my brothers, cousins, aunts and uncles who weren't really aunts and uncles. I don't actually know how they were related to me. It was just kind of like a way station. And so, what they were watching and getting into, the media they liked influenced me. So I was, that little kid at, before school watching like Matlock and Perry Mason and Murder, She Wrote with my grandparents. My mom moved to the States when she was 12. And so like she grew up on like Nancy Drew books, Encyclopedia Brown. She also worked at a bookstore for a while, Walden Books, RIP. And she also works at the library here in Chicago. So she's the one who's really fostered my love for reading mystery. She got me into Mary Higgins Clark when I was still in grade school. Like my house was never like, oh, you're a kid, you can only read kid books. Like if it was in the house, it was fair game. So like we would buddy read Mary Higgins Clark, and I was like 10 years old. She'd bring it home, read it, and be like, "Oh, this was good. Here you go." She's the one who introduced me to cozy mysteries, and I loved them so much. I thought they were so fun, but I never saw characters that looked like me. None of the worlds ever looked like my world, and so I knew like one day I wanted to put my own spin on these books that I loved so much, that didn't seem to kind of like love me back in return.
Wow. Jamie, I was watching you and you were nodding your head. So I imagine there's some kind of link going on. Can you tell us like what made you write in this genre?
Yeah, I mean, both what Mia and Cindy were saying resonate with me so much. Mia, like your mom and you, I grew up on Nancy Drew books. I had the whole series and I just loved them so much. They were my first introduction to, a real mystery series with like a sleuth, a female sleuth especially, who would solve crimes and puzzles. And Cindy, you talking about thrillers and genre fiction allowing you to really explore deeper issues like immigration without, I think, shoving them down people's throat in a way. I think genre fiction can be kind of sneaky in that way. It allows the person reading it to be exposed to these ideas of maybe immigration or like in Salt House Place, my character is mestiza. She's biracial, and she kind of deals with this not quite fitting into one world or the other. And so I explore that. I also explore kind of the ways that toxic masculinity is present kind of everywhere we are. And so those kinds of things that can be harder to talk to people about or examine can be easier in genre fiction because it's like, hey, we're solving a murder, and also sprinkle in these very, very intense topics, without being too upfront or obvious about it. I think it's really, again, to Mia's point, it's really important to see people of color and female protagonists of color in genre fiction as well. So I'm so excited. There is kind of this like renaissance of these amazing mystery and thriller books with people of color being protagonists.
That's so awesome. I love that, like a hallmark of really good mysteries is a captivating protagonist. Cindy, you had discussed that your protagonist, Domingo, is a Filipino American bounty hunter. I know that he's got kind of an ironic twist. Can you discuss how you develop your main characters and like what elements you think are essential for a compelling heroine?
Yes, so my intention when I wrote my protagonists was to make them different and therefore memorable. So for example, with Domingo, he is the first Filipino American bounty hunter in a novel. So that makes him unique. And if nothing else, I want readers to remember him for that. Whether he's captivating or appealing or likable is secondary. Because in the story, he undergoes his own journey. A lot of people ask me, is he the bad guy? Because he's the one hunting down this poor Filipina, undocumented Filipina. You're going to have to find that out. But I made him really different. For me, motivation and actions are what make a character compelling. So I want my protagonists to have really strong motivation to want something very badly, and then they act accordingly.
That's pretty awesome. Mia, you had mentioned Lila as the protagonist of Murder and Mammon. Mm-hmm. I do know that she goes in search of justice for the victim who was found in her ninang's laundromat. Can you tell us how you develop your character and how you take that through a series?
Yeah, so the thing with cozy mysteries is, this is the fourth book, but you don't technically you should not have to have read the previous 3 to be able to read book 4. They follow the same protagonist, they take place in the same world, but they are all standalones. I like to say, like, I don't drop a dead body in book 1 and solve it like 2 books later, right? They're all self-contained, which is good from like a marketing standpoint. Like, you don't have to read them all, you can start wherever, but it can be challenging as an author because I don't want a static character, right? Especially, if you're reading the exact, if she's the exact same person in book 4 than she was in book 1, I'd be like, oh, what's the point? But I can't have her change so much that she's kind of unrecognizable, right? So I think of each book has its own tiny arc, and then I also think in like little mini arcs. So that's one of the reasons I made her 25 years old, right? Which is pretty young. I haven't seen 25 in quite some time. But I tell people, like, I chose that age specifically because I remember what I was like at 25. And, it's one of those, like, you think you know everything, but like clearly you know nothing, right? This is someone who had the audacity and like the naivety of youth, right? Because like, why would this 25-year-old cookie baker think she can solve a murder, right? Oh, because like at 25, you think you're invincible, right? You're like, of course I'll be like, of course things will work out okay. Of course I will be fine. Of course. Particularly because when you think about like, why would this young woman of color in a predominantly white town be doing this kind of thing, right? So I have to like, cozy mysteries are already a suspension of disbelief, right? Like with this, they're all amateur sleuths. They're just regular people, no training, solving these murders. So obviously you're going to pick up these books and kind of let some things go. But I did want to give some things that ground it, right? Like, I want someone who would pick up this book to be like, I would never do this, but I get why she would, right? I make it believable that this person thinks and feels this particular way, and that's why she feels she has to act. So I make each case very personal to her. So in Arsenic and Adobo, which was the debut, she's the main suspect, and her family's restaurant is in danger of closing. So it's very, very personal. It's literally like her life and her family's livelihood is on the line. In the second book, it's like her cousin / frenemy who helped her out in the first book. And, even though they don't get along, she knows her cousin is not a murderer. So she's going to do what she can to help. The third book, it's her actual flesh and blood cousin, who she doesn't like very much, but it's the only child of her beloved aunt. The Tita Rosie is, the series actually is not even named after my protagonist. It's named after her aunt and her aunt's restaurant. That's how important that character is to her. So for the sake of her aunt, she's going to do what she can to prove her cousin innocent. And then the same thing with her ninangs, right? Her godmothers, right? The aunties, she loves them. She may not like them, but she loves them. And she wants to do what she can to protect them. So I do the thing where I make her, I don't like the word relatable, particularly when it comes to women, but I want you to understand why she does what she does. You see her flaws, but that's what just makes her a real person as opposed to like a perfect Mary Sue, magically solving all these cases that the cops can't.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mia. Jamie, in The Salt House, Delia is your protagonist, and she is obsessed with the disappearance of her friend from 10 years ago. Can you tell us how you came up with this character and how you developed her?
Yeah. I wanted to, like I said earlier, have my protagonist be a biracial woman of color because I never encountered them as protagonists growing up. And it's funny because when I started writing, I think that I didn't really allow myself permission to write women of color for a long time. I thought that all protagonists had to be women who lived in the Regency in London and were white. And it was just a very interesting path that took me to where it was okay for me to write about people like me. And I also wanted her to deal with the in-betweenness of being biracial, not quite fitting into one world, not quite being enough for the other world. But I didn't want race to be what the book was about. So again, in the genre fiction world, I thought that it was such a good way for the reader to explore through Delia's eyes her worldview, but not have it become about her race or her experience with that. It was just part of who she was, like it is part of my experience or anyone else's experience, and that shapes their world. That's just how life is. So I wanted it to be realistic from that standpoint. As far as how I came up with it, this is not a spoiler. The book is fully about a cult, and it's fully about a wellness cult. And I am obsessed with cults, and especially wellness cults. And I think I was just binging all these things about cults and wellness cults and MLMs. And I was just fascinated by the psychology of them. And it became really clear to me that, one, I am fully the person who would be tricked into joining a cult. Like, I am self-aware. I am so self-aware that I 100% would be lured into joining a cult. I just know this about myself. But then I was thinking, well, what if, because everyone says like, no, I would never fall for that. I would, but I would never fall for that. But what if someone knowingly went into this situation? They know this is not necessarily, we won't say cult, but they know this is a wellness community. It's an insular community. There's a cult of personality around an enigmatic figure. But you have to go into this community in order to find answers to the mystery, Jazzy, that you mentioned that she is haunted by. So I wanted to put her on this path where she's kind of forced to go into this community where she knows she might be influenced. She's convinced she's not going to be influenced. So how does someone react when they fully know it's a cult? How is that going to affect what they do? Like, how is, even if you try to resist or think you can outsmart people, these people who run these cults and recruit for these things, they are like masters of psychology and masters of manipulation, and it's so fascinating. So I kind of wanted to explore that whole thing. So it's very like Goop, it's very like Nexium. So if you love any of that, you might be interested in my book.
It's incredible. I'm just so excited to be here. I'm like the very excited Filipino tita. So, and we've got lots of questions coming through. Mia, I'm curious. Mysteries keep readers turning pages. Mm-hmm. Can you share, without maybe giving too much away, about your writing process? Like, how is it that you can craft suspenseful plots and create these kind of memorable twists and turns?
Oh, well, first, thank you for that. And second, so I love, like I mentioned, mystery was always my favorite genre growing up, mystery and fantasy. And I always thought, for the longest time, I thought I was gonna be a fantasy writer because I'm like, I love writing. I love reading mysteries, but it seems really hard to write them. And I was correct. I just kind of fell into it. And so for me, because of my contract, in my contract, I have to turn in what's known as a proposal for each of my books before I write it. So book 4 just came out last month. I've already taken in book 5 and I'm writing book 6 right now. And because my books come out fairly quickly, at roughly 8 to 11 months apart so far. Again, I debuted May 2021 and my 4th book just came out. So because it comes out so quickly and because it's required in my contract, I have to turn in the first 3 chapters and a full synopsis of each book before I'm even allowed to write it. And a synopsis is everything major that happens, including the twists, including the reveals, including who the killer is. So I have to tell my editors ahead of time. I can't just be like, we'll find out as I write. No, I have to actually outline and do all that plotting ahead of time. I know not everyone loves plotting, but it's required of me, and it's something that I'm used to. I mean, for me, I don't know that I plot twists because I think Gone Girl has kind of ruined reading for a lot of people because everyone expects like the big twist that changes everything, and I don't think a good book is ruined. Like, people act like oh, the reading experience is ruined if you guess the ending, or the reading experience is ruined if you guess who the killer is ahead of time. And I don't think so. Like, because I read so much in my genre, because I read so many mysteries, like, this is not a flex. I'm used to guessing who the killer is before the detective does. And that's not like bad writing. That's actually like, oh, the author laid the groundwork so that the reader can keep up, right? That doesn't take away from the enjoyment. I actually get to like have that little like moment of satisfaction of like, ooh, I was right. And I hope readers get that as well. Because I know some readers who don't care. They don't try to solve. They just read to the end. Or like, They just read to the end. Or like, oh, cool. Oh, sorry. There was a weird echo. Am I the only one hearing that audio issues?
Let's see.
Okay, it's gone now. Sorry, okay. I couldn't tell. I was like, oh, I don't like hearing myself echoing back. And so I don't plot twists and turns necessarily. I plot these like big major scenes that I need to happen. And then for me, where my writing comes alive is in revisions. I think I am terrible at drafting, which is like when you're getting the initial words on the page. I find the blank page very scary. I know a lot of people love that, and they love the creativity, they love the freedom. I like having a finished product that I know I can make better. So for me, what I'll do is I'll just get the idea out of my head. I'll have an extremely garbage draft of the general story, and then I'll read through it to see like what my subconscious actually kind of laid out, because I don't necessarily be like, oh, this person's a red herring or this is going to be a clue necessarily. I will read and see what's there and then take advantage of it. I'm like, oh, I said this in dialogue for some reason, and if I kind of adjust something later on, that could be like really important information that the reader needs but might not realize how important it is. Or I'll be like, oh, I was just describing the room and said this was there. I don't know why I said that, but now I can use it as, I mine the stuff that's already there and like to further deepen it. And then that way I make it tighter and tighter and tighter as I rewrite. So if there's any like, aspiring writers here, don't think you have to be like a master plotter or like know every single thing ahead of time. For most of us, I'm going to assume Jamie and Cindy are, kind of similar, but like a lot of us just kind of figure it out along the way, honestly. That and outside eyes to let us know when we're like either being too obvious or we're making too much of a jump, because a lot of times like it's in my head, but did I convey it on the page? Not necessarily. That's what editors are for.
That's awesome. Cindy, your book, like you said, is kind of a departure from what you've written before. I also know that you have a background in journalism. Can you share a little bit about your writing process? And, a lot of people are asking about, research. Do you spend a lot of time doing research?
For this book, the main research was the bounty hunter. I have no idea. I didn't want him to be a detective. I didn't want him to be a cop. I didn't want him to be a government actor. And that's why I chose bounty hunter, so he would still have a lot of freedom. He's not tied working for the government. So there's this one book that became my Bible. It's called The Advanced Bounty Hunter by Bob Burton. It turns out it's actually the Department of Justice's training manual. Even the DOJ uses this book written by a famous bounty hunter. It tells you everything you need to know, how to find fugitives, how to arrest properly. Bob Burton kind of elevated the profession of bounty hunting. So that was my main research. Otherwise, the other half of my book is about immigration. I lived that. since I am a recent immigrant myself, so I was very familiar with how to apply, to get a visa. I went from student visa to worker visa to green card and then to citizenship. That part was the easy part. It was just the bounty hunting and having a kick-ass male protagonist that I had to really work so hard for.
Incredible. Thank you, Cindy. Jamie, I know this is your debut. Was your process similar, different? What was your writing process like?
It was actually pretty similar. This is my debut published novel, but this is probably the, I don't know, I forget now, third or fourth novel I wrote. So the third or fourth novel I wrote, first one that actually is published. And it's funny because I wrote the very first chapter and the very last chapter as the first things I wrote. So I always had those. And then for me, it was now I have to connect those two. And this is not normal, but the very first chapter and the very last chapter essentially stayed untouched throughout the editing process. That's very abnormal. So going back to when I was writing it, I had to now connect the two. And I did that with the help of an amazing critique partner group. And I had this book, and then I kind of gave it to some beta readers, and people were like, these plot twists and these elements, are they following the thriller beats? And I was like, say what now? So I didn't know that there were actual plot beats and things that you should outline for. So as far as creating those twists and turns, that was really helpful for me to know and learn. So I had to go back and kind of reverse engineer to make sure all those little puzzles matched and it made sense within the rhythm of the novel. And for readers who are fans of thrillers, when you're super into a genre and you pick up the thriller and you pick up a cozy mystery, you're expecting certain things to happen in every book, right? And it's not that you're always expecting the dead body. You're always expecting, the sleuth. Maybe you're expecting the midpoint twist, but it's all done in different ways. But that's kind of like what you want when you pick up those genre books. And so I had to learn how to create that rhythm by learning how to outline and learning how to plot. And then as far as research, I actually saw a comment fly by if I had listened to the podcast, The Dream. Yes, I'm obsessed with that podcast. It's so good. It is so good. If the one right now, it's on its third season, and the season right now, they're investigating life coaches, which is interesting. But the first season was about MLMs, which was fascinating. So I did a lot of podcast reading, a lot of podcast listening, a lot of reading books and articles and watching documentaries, and just my own kind of interest in, it's fiction. So you get to make up your own world, and what would my cult be like?
Incredible. Thank you, Jamie. I'm actually, the next question, because it is Filipino American Heritage Month, had you told me that I would be moderating an event with Filipino American women authors when I was a child, I wouldn't have believed you. So this ties to Diane's question. And I want to know, what has inspired you to become a writer? And also, as a Filipino American woman of color, has it? I think it has. How has it influenced your journey as a writer? Mia, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So, I got into writing because one, I loved books, and I kind of just dabbled and never really imagined life without writing. I didn't necessarily think I'd become an author. That always seemed like a very like pie in the sky, like that's for that like, you know, those superstars. I can never be like that. But I always created in some way. And you know, it's like that Toni Mercer, like if you can't find the book you want to see, I'm butchering that quote. Like, you know, you can't find the book you want to see in the world, you have to write it yourself. And you know, it took me forever to find. I think the very first book I ever read that had Filipino characters in it is When the Elephants Dance by Tessa Arisa Holt, which is historical fiction, takes place in the Philippines, Japanese occupied World War II times. And I was like, oh my God, like I know this world. Even though I was born and raised in the States, like there was a language and there was a feeling. I was just like, oh, this is so familiar in a way that I've never had before. And you know, I want to say maybe like late high school when I read it. But I never imagined as a child that I would ever read Filipino characters. And again, those weren't even Filipino American. That took place in the Philippines. And so I always wanted characters that looked like me, that represented my world. And you know, earlier you also mentioned like why Mr. I don't think it had to be Mr. I just think it's really important for to have like Filipinos and other people from marginalized backgrounds writing in genre fiction. That's why I write in genre fiction. A lot of times, people from marginalized backgrounds, historically underrepresented backgrounds, we get to write like literary fiction that capitalizes like on our pain and our the trauma books, which are, you know, beautifully written. Like I'm not hating on anyone's, like they're beautifully written. They tell stories that are very, very important. They resonate for a reason. But I don't think that's all we should be allowed to write, right? Like I don't feel like I have to keep dipping, like when someone's like, you know, dipping my ink in my blood for others to read me. I want to read about our joy. I want us to be able to go on adventures. I want us to get to be the heroes. I want us to go on, you know, fantastical quests. I want everything. I want us to have the broad spectrum. I want us to be able to have choices. I want us to be able to be mediocre, right? Without having to worry about failing and having to be better than all the time. And so like that's why I write, and that's particularly why I write genre. Because before that, if I did find Filipino American writers, it was literary fiction and poetry. And again, I respect both of those very much, but that's not how I write. If you've read my books, I write very similar to how I talk. If you don't like how I talk, you're not going to like my books very much, FYI. And so it's one of those things where like I can admire these things, but I know I cannot aspire to write that way because it's not me. And I wanted more books that sound like me.
Amen. Cindy, what inspired you to write, and what has been your experience as a woman of color writer?
Yeah, so unlike other writers, I am a late bloomer. I unfortunately grew up in a household of non-readers. My parents never read. My sisters never read. So I picked up reading from school in the Philippines where I grew up. I didn't start reading really until high school, and then in college. And then when I came to the US as a graduate student, then I became a serious reader. I think that if I had not immigrated to the US, I wouldn't be a novelist. Walter Mosley, the best-selling author of the E.Z. Rawlins mystery series, he said, if your people are not in fiction, they don't exist. I felt after I became a US citizen that my people, Filipino Americans, are not in fiction, or rather there were very few of them in fiction, and therefore I felt like my people didn't exist. I am, in fact, very intentional about my writing. I write precisely because I am Filipino American and I want to see Filipino American characters. That's why I write. And I have been told repeatedly, I started writing in 1995, believe it or not. I have been repeatedly told by literary agents, nobody wants to read about Filipino protagonists. Nobody wants to read about immigration. And then becomes American dirt, and they pay, you know, 6 figures for it. So I don't buy that. I don't buy that. And I wasn't particularly hung up about writing literary fiction, but indeed, my first try was pretty heavy-handed. And now I can see that in hindsight. And so when I found the thriller genre, I embraced it fully because I felt like, well, you know, I could tell exactly the same story, but from a different perspective and make it really entertaining. But yeah, I write because I am a Filipino immigrant and I felt like I must write. This is what I was born to do. This is
Oh, so inspiring. I know that Joanna's going to jump on to ask some author questions, but Jamie, please tell us what inspired you to write and what has been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Mia and Cindy have said. I've always written. I entered a elementary school poetry contest when I was young, and I won with a poem about dinosaurs. That was probably my crowning achievement of my writing career, even so far, I will say. But yeah, I find writing just so healing for both the writer and the reader, and I hope that you know, readers get something out of my book. I certainly get a lot out of writing, and I think it is, you know, even if I never got published, I would be writing. It's just something that I think if you're a writer, you know, you have to write no matter what. So yeah, it's just what I do, I guess. I've always been inspired to do it.
Wow, ladies, thank you so very much for sharing such insight into your world. It looks like Joanna's hopping on. Hi, Joanna.
Hi there. Sorry. Oops. Now I'm like clicking on the wrong things. How do I get my video working?
Sorry, well, I guess while Joanna's working on that, I did want to hop in because something Cindy said reminded me that I didn't answer all of your questions yet. So I rambled so much I missed part of your question because you're asking like how the reception of being a Filipino American writer was. Like Cindy, so and also like Jamie, Arsenic and Adobo was my debut, but it wasn't the first book I finished. It wasn't the book that originally got me agented. It wasn't the first book I tried to sell. The first book I tried to sell was called Death Comes to Comic-Con, featured a queer Filipino American millennial solving a murder mystery at a comic book convention. It got me pretty far. It almost got picked up 3 times, but the sales teams were very bold and would say things like traditional mystery is for older white women. Nobody's going to read this book. She should write YA because that's where diversity is. She has a great voice, but no one will buy this. I've got told that multiple times in writing, saying the quiet part very loud, like Cindy said. And this was like 2018, 2019. It was not that long ago. And then I sold Arsenic and Adobo in 2020. So it's like, oh, I guess apparently people want to read us after all.
100% they want to read it. Oh my gosh. You know, I think one of the things that we've seen with the bookstore is there is this hunger for Filipino American stories. And we get so many readers who come in who are either themselves Filipino or they have a loved one in their family, and they're so excited to see your books on the shelves and be able to share them. So I just wanted to tell all of you, like, thank you so much for creating all of this amazing work that we now get to enjoy. We do have some great questions. I feel like you guys did answer some of the questions that were already asked in the chat. But one question that came from Heather, she says, Mia, congratulations on your new release. Your books are my first cozy mystery. What has been your favorite part of releasing Murder and Mamon? And I would ask the same for Jamie and Cindy, since these are both either a debut book or a follow-up book.
I would say this book is really special to me because it's the beginning of a new contract. So I originally sold Arsenic and Adobo as part of a 3-book contract. So when I turned in Blackmail and Babinka, I had no idea, like, is this it? right? Is this as far as I get to go with Lila? And, luckily, thanks to support from readers like you, my publisher extended my contract, which is why I'm contracted up to book 6. So with book 4, that's why it might be a slight departure in voice, because Lila's in a different place in her life now, and so am I. And it's kind of like new beginnings. And I find that both exciting and terrifying, as most new beginnings are.
Amazing. I love that. And then I just wanted to share a comment for Jamie. EP says that your book sounds like Aro Kwan's The Incendiaries. He's super interested.
Oh my gosh, that is high praise. I don't know. I don't want to. Thank you so much. Thank you. I love Aro Kwan, and that's an amazing book.
Me too. I just got to meet her like a couple weeks ago, so that was like a big fangirl moment. Oh. I wanted to follow up with also Jamie and Cindy. Like, what has been your favorite part with releasing your books?
Go first.
Thank you, Cindy. So my book came out on September 1st, and it was really fun because I was with Mia and Cindy in person in San Diego at Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore for an in-person event. And yeah, I think it was the day before, it was the evening before September 1st. So it was the evening before my pub date, my release date. And yeah, it was so great. It was just lovely being with readers and being with Mia and Cindy. So this, for those who didn't know, this is kind of a little reunion. Got the band back together. So that was just a very fun highlight of my release experience.
As for me, I think a lot of people don't understand, or they find it strange that I have this bounty hunter protagonist. And guess what? One of my readers is Dog the Bounty Hunter himself.
Yes.
What?
That's amazing.
Find that out.
He reached out to me.
Oh my God.
He wrote to me through my website on the forms that people would write. And then he says, please email me, and because I would like to talk to you. And he goes, Dog Chapman. I'm like, could this be Dwayne Dog the Bounty Hunter? Oh my God. Anyway, to make a long story short, I did not believe it. And my husband's like, oh, you should buy a burner phone, because in case you don't want to give your phone number. And then my publicist says, I checked his phone number and it was blocked. It said celebrity. So it seems like he's the real deal.
Wow.
It was so funny. But anyway, so we finally got connected. I spoke to him, and he's reading my book. So the verdict is not out yet. I don't know, but I was so surprised. He reads books. He reads a Filipino American. I mean, it's not that he reads books, but he would read a Filipino American protagonist, which all the literary agents told me in 1990s that nobody wanted to read about. I'm sorry. So that was the most fun part so far.
That is pretty amazing. I don't know that I have heard anybody top that. That's so cool, Cindy. Congratulations. And like we were all saying, Filipinos are interesting. We have lots of different kinds of stories. Everybody wants to hear about it. So that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Now I'm like too distracted now. I'm like to think. Heather had a question for Jamie. When you were talking about, I think, learning how to write a thriller, and you mentioned like the like that there's certain beats that you have to hit.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So and it's not just thrillers. In any novel, in any fiction novel, there are what they call beats, and those are just points. A beat is a point in a story where something should happen, or the reader expects a certain thing to happen. So if you've ever heard, so like the midpoint, that's a beat, right? Which is literally the middle of the story. But if you have ever heard the term dark night of the soul, where everything is lost, that's a beat. So if you're a writer and you want to learn more about plotting and beats, Save the Cat. Why can I never remember this name? Is it Save the Cat? Okay. Save the Cat is a book that talks about beats and goes through the different beats for different genres and story types. So that is what that is.
Yeah, Save the Cat was originally for screenwriters, because in screenwriting, like, beats are like super, super important. And a lot of, what we do in plotting comes from screenwriting. But there's also a Save the Cats for novelists, because people have been using it so much. So yeah, if that's a craft book, it's a pretty good one.
That's awesome. Also, I just popped over to the chat and like everybody's dying over Cindy's comment.
Oh, cool.
I just want to be Cindy when I grow up.
Right?
Seriously.
Cindy is so cool.
You might be a late bloomer, Cindy, but you were blooming pretty hard. Let's see. I had one more question, which was for all the authors from Heather. What has been one of your favorite reads of 2023 so far? We still have a few more months, but anything standing out?
Okay, I'll start. It's not a 2023 book, but I just read it. Maria Ressa's memoir,
Oh, yeah.
How to Stand Up to a Dictator. I highly recommend it. She covers so much ground in that book. Politics, socioeconomic, culture. It's incredible. And she is Filipino American, so she straddles too. She understands having these two cultures, two countries. It's a great book.
That's a great suggestion.
I'm always like, oh, what is the book? Have I ever read one? Okay. So because it's Filipino, so the most recent one I read, but I can highly recommend it. I loved it so much. Was The Spirit Glass by Roshni Joshi, which is it's part of the Rick Riordan Presents line. So it's a middle grade novel that is based on Filipino mythology, and it is so good. And again, it's made for middle schoolers, and they're like in this, like, just like all good middle grade. Like, I was laughing at one point and then literally, not exaggerating, like sobbing at another point in the story. It is really, really fun. And again, it's one of those just like, I can't believe I get to read a middle grade novel that centers Filipino mythology. Like, this is like young me, like could never imagine that.
I will shout out a friend author of mine. Her name is Ellen Won Steele, and she's a Korean American author. And her book is Fortune. And it is it's a mystery thriller, and the plot like blows my mind. I don't know how she thought of this, but the plot is that a town decides they're going to solve this unsolved murder of a child by holding a DNA lottery.
Wow.
So it was very good.
I love that. Jazzy, you have a book to share?
My goodness. When I was invited to moderate for this event, I was stalking everybody, and I was like, I need to devour everyone's book. I recently purchased Cindy's previous book, My MacArthur. And it is so fantastic. I'm a vintage junkie. And so it takes you back into like 1930s, and and just to see like a woman, a Filipino woman that could command so much from a man who commands so much. I think it's a fantastic book.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you. So I really, really love that. I also, this person is not a Filipino American person, but she is a woman of color writer. Her name is Danielle Henderson. I'm a memoir junkie. She wrote a book called The Ugly Cry. And it really resonated with me because I'm like Gen X, like millennial. And she grew up in Los Angeles, and she had, in New York, I think. And The Ugly Cry, it's the ugly cry that makes you feel so good. So
Oh, awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're at 6 minutes, so we have a little bit more time. So let me just double check our questions. Somebody just asked really quick about your, Mia, your post about the, hopefully I don't mispronounce this, the Kamogawa food detective. Have you had a chance to read it yet?
Yes, it is. So if you go into it thinking that it's like going to be like a typical like American style storytelling and American style mystery, you're going to be disappointed. If you are going for kind of like this really beautiful slice of life father-daughter detective where, you know, like basically like where like nostalgia is like the best flavor, it is like the ultimate. I have no time to read. Everything I read is for blurbs or to review, because I also review for book list. And yet I've reread that book at least twice since I blurbed it, because it's just again, it's like when you think cozy, that is just very like it's so low stakes, which makes you think it's going to be boring. But there's just something really, really human and beautiful and character driven about it. I greatly enjoyed it, but they're like little vignettes, little slice of life things.
Amazing. That sounds fascinating. Okay, I'm going to give you guys each a chance to tell us a little bit about, hopefully, if you have a new project. I know Mia, I can't believe that you're already on book 6. That's super exciting. And we hope that the Tita Rosie series continues. And if you, have other things that you are looking at writing, but we'd love to hear from each of you. If you have other works that you are working on at this point, and where can readers find you?
Yeah, so I guess so other than the Tita Rosie's Kitchen books, which I already talked about, my very first short story was published in an anthology in August. So the anthology is titled Fit for the Gods, and it is modern inclusive retellings of Greek mythology. I took on the Furies and reimagined them as Filipino siblings that run a detective agency in Chicago that specializes in family drama and revenge. It is not a cozy. I got to say swears for the first time. It was great. It was a lot of fun. Like writing in a more like noir, old school like PI voice, but still very much my style. I also just recently sold a new project that I can't talk too much about because it hasn't been announced yet. All I can say is, yes, it is mystery, but is in a different age category. So it is hopefully going to be announced sometime this month. So keep an eye on my socials. So, yeah, I am waiting to edit book 5. I am writing book 6. I am writing that new project I just sold, and I'm also promoting book 4 and that anthology. So
I don't know how you do it, Mia.
Not well, I can tell you that.
How about for Cindy and Jamie?
Jamie, go.
Okay. So yeah, I am. I will be releasing my next book next year. So September 2024. Is that next year? What is time? September 2024. My next book will be out. It is also a thriller. It's a standalone thriller, so not connected to Salt House Place, but it will be called Always the Quiet Ones. Ooh. And it will be kind of on take on strangers on the train, and it'll be 2 millennial female lawyers who agree that they're going to kill each other's toxic male bosses.
Ooh. Amazing.
So for me,
sorry, Cindy, I'm so sorry. And sorry, I know Joanna asked us to say where you can reach us. And you can learn more about me at jamieleesong.com. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. For me, it was a 2-book deal. So there is a book 2. It's called Mulat, which in Tagalog means aware, or to be aware with your eyes open. It's the same protagonist, Domingo, but a different case. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's always just at Cindy Fazzi.
Amazing. And Cindy, when does Mulat come out?
It'll be next year, but I don't have a pub date yet.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much again to Jazzy De Leon for moderating, and to our authors, Mia P. Manansala, Jamie Lee Sogn, and Cindy Fazzi.
Thank you so much.
Oh, before I forget, I almost forgot.
Winner.
The giveaway.
I know. I was like, oh, she's wrapping up.
I was like, oh no, the giveaway. Okay, so and I'm like, how do I choose which book who to give what? So I think I'm just going to do them like this. So to Heather's Life Path, thank you so much for all of your fantastic comments. We're going to send you Multo. So hopefully I can figure out how to reach out to you. I like tag people. And then for Salt House Place, I'm going to do Katie. Thank you so much for participating, Katie. Yay.
Thank you, Katie.
All right. So if you were still on here, please, you can DM us on Instagram at Canto Books, and we'll figure out how to get your address. So let me just drop that in here. And then let's see. Okay, 1, 2, and the last one, a copy of Murder and Mammon, is going to go to Ami.
Yay!
Yay! Congratulations, everyone. So if you were one of our winners, Heather, Katie, and Ami, send us a DM on Instagram, and we will get these books out to you. Thank you again, everyone. Please go out and buy these authors' books, preferably for an independent bookstore, like us at Canto Books. And we hope to see you again at a future event. You can find out more information about us at belcantobooks.net. Thank you so much, everyone. And we hope that you come back to the LA area, and hopefully this time mosey on up to Long Beach.
Will do. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.